Hey there troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit and I'm back again today with another Tactical Tuesday, and today we're looking at something I like to call threat analysis. Now, this is something I passively do in Battlefield 5, but it's something that's worth knowing about, and something I think a lot of you can learn a lot from in terms of just thinking about how you play the game, how you maneuver between objectives, and how in general you just work better as an individual. Moving around Battlefield is never necessarily easy, and I feel like movement between maps is something that can be passed off as very simple, but also something that can be very deep and very complex, and you'll find in Battlefield 5 that's exactly what the game is. It's layers of simplicity that can also be conceived as layers of lots of depth, and that applies to everything from gunplay to everything in between. And for me personally, this is something that I find really important. Now, during this video, you're going to see me freeze frame every once in a while. When you see those freeze frames, I will be highlighting areas in green that will represent good cover, and I'll be highlighting areas in red that will represent places that I am being aware of threats. In Battlefield 5, whenever you move between objectives, you need to be passively analyzing everything you need to do in the game. You need to be looking at different regions that could pose a potential threat, and you also need to even be aware of things that are off screen that would also double as a potential issue to you as well. So what exactly should you be looking for and identifying in Battlefield 5 that can be given as a threat, and what exactly should you be looking for to counteract those things? Now, the big one for me is things that I like to call vantage points and firing positions. In Battlefield 5, there are tons of these. Anything can become a vantage point or firing position if utilized correctly with the right reinforcements, or even if it's just in the right location at any given point looking down on a certain objective. And you'll see, for example, when I'm moving through this bridge on Twisted Steel, that we have loads of threats, we have loads of potential firing positions and loads of locations where at any given point an enemy could occupy this region and use hard cover against me. And what you'll notice in particular is that it's not necessarily always the best firing positions or the most obvious ones that make the most sense. A good example I like to use is that, for example, when you're on the map Arras, there is the church that leads into Objective E, which is the inner town section. Now, that might seem like a great location, but in actuality it isn't, because it's incredibly obvious. That's not to say that it still doesn't represent an issue, but it's safe to say that there will be more low-key positions that are out of the way that will potentially be more threatening to you as a player. And I'm actually going to highlight some of these areas in brighter shades of red to give you a better idea of the likelihood I think I'd anticipate when looking at these situations. Now, of course there are defensive firing positions and things like that you need to be wary of, but there's also more simplistic things as well, and this is something a lot of people miss out of in Battlefield 5, and for me this is things like concealment and also things like lighting. You'll notice in a lot of my footage, more or less any game, I will use destruction to try and open up the lighting for an area. And I will actually be talking this in a much more detailed and in-depth video in the future, but what I tend to do is that when I know that an area is supremely dark, I either avoid that location, or I will destroy the roof, for example, to let the light flood into the building, because Battlefield 5 of course features dynamic lighting. And you'll notice that there are locations dotted all around the map where darker locations actually work as better firing positions. It's why you'll notice that on the Twisted Steel Bridge, there are places like under cars which you should actually be more heavily concerned about than you should with things like boxes and more obvious locations, for example, because they're darker, less obvious, and it's more likely that if somebody were to fire from there, you'd be less aware of their position. And it's things like that that definitely need avoiding. The next one is of course concealment. Concealment in Battlefield 5 is huge now. Spotting is less important, it doesn't have as much effect, and it isn't that around that heavily. And because of that, you really need to think about concealment in Battlefield 5 and where players can be. And I'm not just talking about people hiding in bushes, I'm talking about people meshing into objectives behind them. You'll notice this a lot on the Destruction of Rotterdam map, but even on maps like Twisted Steel, where people can literally blend into situations by using the sort of greyish colours of their soldier against the backdrops of metals and concretes. And that works incredibly well too. And I don't think you can ever really run through any location blindly. You really do have to check everything bit by bit. And I know it's quite strange because in Battlefield we've so trained to looking for that big red icon to shoot at, But in actuality, this game requires the focus of your eyes. You need to pay attention to your screen. You need to fixate on locations and scan areas where people likely could be. Because whether they're hiding behind a few rusted beams on the ground, in a bush, or if they're hiding behind massive boxes of heavy cover, there will always be potential firing positions where somebody can take you on, and think about it. And the best way I could summarize this really is just think to yourself, if you were somebody looking to attack another player, where would you be? Because that's what I do when I play this game. You know, I figure out where these potential threats are coming from because I identify them as places that I probably would have been in the first place. I probably would have gone there to attack a position or hide in a certain place or to get the drop on someone. And the more you can get into the mindset of identifying locations where you would be, the more you can get into the mindset of counteracting that potential threat before it even occurs. So troops, that's about it from me today, the Tactical Brit. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and please let me know what you want me to cover next. Is there a certain tactic or certain issue that you think I should look at in Battlefield 5? Because I'm definitely open to those suggestions. As always troops, thank you for watching, and I will see you soon in the next video.